But here's number one. First of all, you got to have the right philosophy. Philosophy is our ability to gather knowledge and sort through it and decide what's valuable. To develop a philosophy about life, a philosophy about our health, a philosophy about our family relationships, a philosophy about economics. And if you develop the right philosophy, that's what helps to set this sail so that in 6 years it takes you where you want to go, instead of winding up like I did that first 6 years of my economics, broke, no money, empty bank account. The right philosophy. Now let me give you a couple of philosophies to consider. Here's the first one. It's called the philosophy of the poor. And here it is. Poor people usually spend their money and invest what's left. That's the philosophy of the poor. Now here's the philosophy of the rich. Rich people invest their money and spend what's left. And here's the startling answer. It really doesn't matter what the amount is. What's most important is not the amount. What's really important is the philosophy. So I would ask you to adopt this philosophy of spending after you have invested. Invest first, then spend. So number one of the ideas I wanted to share with you to make this an extraordinary opening year century for you is philosophy. We're affected by what we know. Second is attitude. We're affected by how we feel. Third is activity. We're affected by what we do. Now here's the final two pieces. Number four, learn to measure progress. Once you've set up a project now, you want to turn nothing into something. Now you must measure your progress. How are you doing? Here's how we teach it to our children. Life expects us to make measurable progress in reasonable time. Measurable progress in reasonable time. That is the game of life. So part of it is not just to set up the proposed project, but as we start working on it, we start measuring how we're doing. Now first, what is reasonable time? You can't ask someone every 5 minutes, how are you doing now? See, that's too soon. Guy says, I haven't left the building yet. Give me a break. Now, we can't wait 5 years. That's too long. So there's reasonable time. So make this note now. What is reasonable time? One, at the end of the day. A conversation a father should have with his daughter today, because the magic is there. If he waits till tomorrow, the magic may be gone today. Next is a week. Make that note. Usually, we get paid by the week. Somebody adds up our value to the marketplace, out comes the check. The next week, somebody adds up our value to the marketplace, out comes the check. What I learned to do is to change my value to the marketplace so the check kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I didn't have to change the economy, I only had to change myself. Measure your own progress. Success is a numbers game. We demand it of our children. How many years do you want your child to spend in 4th grade? Approximately. About 1 year, right? You say, well, if they're nice kids, would you give them 3 or 4 years? You say, no. This is not a nice game. This is getting ready for the future. This is getting ready for the challenges and the opportunities. You can't linger in 1 grade more than 1 year. Now make this note. The same should go for us as adults. Don't linger more than 1 year in 1 grade of learning. Adult, management, entrepreneurship, leaderships of all kind. Keep up the pace of learning. Okay. The numbers. Measure. Count. Now here's the key. Face the truth. If you're only making this much progress, you know, there's no use trying to kid the world, no use trying to kid anybody else, and especially don't kid yourself. If in a period of time you've only made so much progress, you just got to swallow hard and say, this is the truth. I've got to face it. Now, what could I do to start increasing my progress and make my health better, make my income better, make my investments better, make my value to the marketplace much better, get busy learning the second skill and the third skill and the next language and the next language to increase my value. I got to get busy and do that. See if you will do that. I promise you, one of the greatest motivating factors in the world is progress. And if you'll measure it, you'll get excited.
All things are possible. And I always ask an audience, what does that leave out? You know, that all things are possible literally means all things are possible. So whatever it is you'd like to attract into your life, whatever you'd like to accomplish, whatever you'd like to do in your life, if you start from a spiritual place, a place of all things are possible, if I return, you know, and get to that place, and then I begin to visualize it, and I begin to use my imagination, because everything that we see around us, everything in this world, was once imagined. Everything, you know, that camera that is there, the clothes that you're wearing, the chairs that we're sitting on, everything once had to be imagined. If you get that, I mean, Einstein's famous observation was that, you know, imagination is more important than knowledge. If you can learn how important your imagination is, and that's where your spirit is, in that place, and then once you go to that place, in what it is you'd like to attract into your life, you're coming from a spiritual place, absolutely nothing is impossible.
Most leaders, most business people, most entrepreneurs, most human beings have never learned to be masterful communicators. And the very nature of influence and impact, which is the leader's job, is communication. I mean, in school, were you given a communication course? Very few people have been taught that. In your personal relationships, have you read books on communication? Well, that leads to, I mean, in an intimate relationship, or even just with a friend, it's the little miscommunications that over time stack into loss. In your intimate relationships, it's the little conversations that you could have had in 5 minutes if you had the tools to communicate and the awareness to speak. So literally, you could release the anger and build understanding and speak out your needs and feel the need to be heard. All those little things, if you had learned how to do that and done it in 5 minutes with your intimate partner, you might not have lost the relationship. And in your professional life, learning to communicate inspires your teammates. You know, if you look at the great leaders of humanity, the Nelson Mandelas, the Mother Teresas, the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the John F. Kennedys, if you look at the great business builders, Steve Jobs, great example, right? He would be on the stage at the product launch, and then that favorite line, one more thing. And that's when he would reveal the latest piece of technology that would create industry dominance when Steve Jobs was at Apple. Well, he was a masterful communicator, and Bud Tribble over at Apple called it his reality distortion field. Steve Jobs was a master salesman. He knew exactly what to say to get people to believe in the impossible, to allow their I can't to be less valuable than their I can't.
You're not a procrastinator. You have a habit of procrastinating. Big difference. Because if it's a habit, I can teach you to use science to break it. You see, all habits have 3 parts. There's a trigger, and in the case of procrastination, the trigger's always stress. Then there's a pattern you repeat, and in the case of procrastination, it is to avoid doing something. And then there's a reward. You get a little stress relief. The only way to break a habit, you guys, is not to deal with the triggers. You're never gonna get rid of the stress in your life, but you can 100% change your pattern of avoiding work. So next time that you're in a situation where you feel yourself hesitate, you spent way too much time checking out the highlights from last night's scores, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go, oh, I must be stressed out about something. Acknowledge the stress. Then go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I want you to count to yourself because I want you to interrupt the habit that's stored here, and I want you to awaken your prefrontal cortex. Then I want you to just work, just for 5 minutes. The reason why I want you to only work for 5 minutes is because your problem isn't working. It's the habit of avoiding. I just need you to start. And here's the other cool thing. We know based on research that if we can get you to start, 80% of you are going to keep going.